Hey everybody. Okay, as promised, I am re-recording the second half of the presentation that I did for the Lent Learning series on polarization for the Grove Church in Woodbury. So why are we polarized and what to do about it? So when the recording cut out, I was talking about campaigns and campaign spending. And one of the reasons that, in my opinion, campaign spending has been skyrocketing is because of what I call our campaign industrial complex. There is no such thing as campaign season anymore. Campaigns are all year. The day after election day is when the next campaign season begins, and that is exhausting. And local elected officials, all the way up to members of Congress, have to raise money almost every day to pay for all of the things that they need to run the races. And none of that money is spent on how great the other side is or how we can come together. And the article that's on the right side of your screen, the DCCC evidently had so much money, and they had a strategy. They ran ads in favor of a further right candidate over a more moderate Republican incumbent because they thought the matchup would give their candidate a better chance. And it's possible they were right, but they also got a lot of pushback from within their own party because that was seen as dangerous. And I can't say I disagree. Okay, media. So this section could be another 30 minutes by itself. If you're used to hearing about how the media is biased and you want to use this time to check your phone, that isn't that presentation. Now, most journalists in this country really do try to keep their own biases out. Note, I said journalists there, and I use that term very specifically. It used to be that we could see the difference between the New York Times and the National Enquirer. Remember that National Enquirer, like at the checkout line, that had like Elvis sightings and alien abductions? Well, nobody used to put these two media outlets in the same category, and for good reason. But with the internet, we have lumped these two and bloggers and partisan news outlets and talk radio and cable news all together under the heading of media. And it's sort of harder to tell what's journalism anymore, so consumers can't really be faulted. And that's what some people count on. And the way we consume political news is what I call a hidden element of structural partisanship. Having one pundit from the right and one pundit from the left leaves us with this visual that there are only two sides to issues. Journalism does have a bias towards fairness, so presenting the left talking points are pundit and the right talking points are pundit, and then you've checked that box. But are there ever just two sides to a story? Nope. All right, the last thing on this slide is about angertainment, which is a term that was coined by somebody else in Minnesota, Nate Garvis, who owns an organization called Naked Civics, and he has a great book. And I really think in the future, we are going to see that the psychological damage that we have done to ourselves by investing in angertainment and calling it news is going to be a very big deal. So speaking of psychological damage, let's talk about social media and algorithms. The old adage in TV news is if it bleeds, it leads. But now we all have way more ways to get our own news. And it turns out that if we're interested enough to click on negative or outrageous headlines, and if I didn't know better, I think that we like to be outraged. And see, not only do we click on it, we have a tendency to develop this content ourselves. Social media addiction is a real thing and a really dangerous thing because it's based in human physiology. So like when you get a like on a social media post, you get a little hit of dopamine up in your brain. It makes you feel good. And whatever makes us feel good, we'll do again, over and over again. And for some, that translates to substance misuse. To some, that translates on having zingers on Twitter or creating anger-provoking posts on Facebook. And the more people react, the more dopamine you get. So of course we're divided because of geography, because of the way we do media, because of our physiology and getting those dopamine hits, and just because we're human. But so I still have hope. And here's why. This is information from the Pew Research Center. Every few years, they break down left versus right and try to figure out where people actually are on a scale, not just over here and over there, but in the scale. And seeing diversity, even among polarization, is helpful. To change, you don't have to cross the great divide. You still stay on the scale. The different makes change and evolution or transformation easier. You can just shift this way a little bit or shift that way a little bit. And there are a lot of people in organizations who are working on overcoming division and getting us out of our bubbles. These are just 6 organizations that I just kind of picked at random. There are hundreds of them. I liked the way these logos all look together. Braver Angels, which is the square up in the top right-hand corner. That was Joanne, who was the first person in this series. And the flip side, which is a fun website, I like the bear in the monocle, so that's fun. So we know we're divided. We're aware that invisible forces are acting on us to keep us divided or to divide us to start with. What the heck do we do now? So there are easy things that you can do to turn down the political temperature in your own community and help with some of that division. The first one is yard signs. If you still have an election yard sign up in your yard, take it down. In most cities, there is a specific window of time that election signs can be up, and there are good reasons for this, sort of beyond aesthetics. A never-ending campaign season keeps us all in the competition mode and highlights our differences. And whether your preferred candidate won or lost, that election is over. Put the sign back in storage until the next campaign, and just don't have that visual association in your neighborhood. Please do not clap. So there have always been people who shout during public meetings, and they used to be kind of few and far between. But now, instead of the sort of murmur of surprise and disapproval from the audience, particularly us Minnesotans, disrespect and incivility that is exhibited during public meetings, at city councils, at school boards. School boards have gotten to an issue. That disrespect and incivility is often backed with applause. And again, our brains are wired to do more of the same when we are rewarded. So you can do your best to disincentivize incivility in others by not reacting to it. The same goes for online communication. Model the behavior you want to see and keep your commentary civil. And I will say, like, I know this from personal experience. Like, it is kind of hard to skip putting a really good zinger on Twitter when you have one. And snark breeds more snark, especially on social media. So if you can't resist, you just can't pass it up. I would say find a sarcasm buddy. I have a sarcasm buddy and a private text thread just between the two of us. And if I have something snarky to say, I send it to him. And so I can get it out of my system. He will laugh at it. He will like it. I get the dopamine hit in my brain and I don't contribute to that toxic sort of thing online. Introducing yourself to elected representatives. Find out who represents you in the city council, the state senate, in Congress, etc. And introduce yourself. Just send them an email and say, I'm a constituent in your district and I just wanted to say hi. I will bet you any kinds of money you will get a response to this email because they're so rare. And having a connection point with an elected official that is not a complaint is a really good way to become known. And then when you do have specific thoughts about something on the agenda or a bill, your elected official already knows who you are. So give elected officials feedback, use official channels, be respectful. And something like 99% of elected officials in this country are serving part-time. So again, sort of going back to the official channels and whatever, let your city council member do their grocery shopping in peace. That's one of those sort of common things amongst local elected officials is getting constituent feedback in the grocery store. And it shouldn't need to be said, but intimidation tactics like protesting at private homes should definitely be off limits if you are trying to bring down the political temperature and help sort of cross the divide. Get your information from credentialed journalists. Support reputable news organizations that have editorial control and who subscribe to a code of ethics. And if you are having issues with a paywall, subscribe to that. Or if you can't afford to subscribe, reach out to your local library and they will help you out. Do not amplify outlets that pretend to be news or who promote angertainment with your attention or your dollars. Avoid supporting party endorsements for nonpartisan offices. And if you want less extreme candidates for the partisan races, you're going to have to go to the caucus and find the more moderate voices. Elevate those people and support their endorsement. Most moderate candidates, and I'm not even saying like moderate, like mushy middle, not even just those people, but like a more moderate candidate within the Republican Party or a more moderate candidate within the Democratic Party. They generally don't make it onto your ballot in November because caucus attendees and people who vote in primaries tend to prefer the more extreme right or left. And less people make endorsement decisions than you would think, so it's not hard to become one of those people. Rethink hard stops and non-negotiables. Okay, so like any voluntary group of people contains a lot of diverse points of view. So if you can try to actively avoid assuming that all Republicans think this or all Democrats support that, that can really be helpful into keeping your mindset out of that polarization. All parents, Baptists, soccer players, teachers, and pickup truck drivers, all of those groups of people, they have things that they share, but they also have a lot of diversity in thought. So participation in a political party should not have to equal 100% endorsement of other people's views. So if you can, and I know this is really hard, if you can rethink your hard stops and non-negotiables, that can help. And if you have a neighbor who is of another party, if you're not part of that big sort yet, not holding your next door neighbor responsible for something that a member of Congress said during a press conference can be really helpful. All right. Letting differences be a minor blip and not a major barrier. So if you have someone in your life who you disagree with politically, like I have this even within my own family, finding 5 things you have in common and prioritizing those in your relationship and sort of just not talking politics can be the way to salvage that relationship. Most of us we don't have the luxury of just avoiding people of a different political persuasion, whether that's in your family or at work or in other groups. And here's the thing, having different political views and still getting along can be acceptable, even in 2023. It was fine in 2013 too. It's true now. Getting along and reducing polarization doesn't mean you have to find a way to participate in political conversations. Sometimes it can just mean just not talking politics. And keeping the politics out of non-political spaces keeps people from being forced to engage and can go a long way in healing our civic culture. So these are 3 books. People ask me what I read. I read a lot of things. I'm a big reader. And 3 things that I think are sort of very relevant to this conversation. These 3 books. The Big Sort, I mentioned, by Bill Bishop. Why We're Polarized, Ezra Klein, great book. Goes into much more of the history and sort of political things than I do. And then High Conflict by Amanda Ripley is an amazing book. And it deals with conflict, not just within political spaces, but put in other spaces as well. So I just, if you can, I would say those books are probably in order. If you want to read all three, great. If you want to read two of the three, I would say take the ones on the right. And if you can only read one, I highly recommend High Conflict. So that's the presentation. Like I said, this was a presentation that was created specifically for the Lent Learning series at the Grove. But if you have another organization that would be interested in having a same or similar presentation, my contact information is there. And thanks for listening.